the franchise, Shane Douglas. How you doing, buddy?
How you fucking doing? I've been waiting and dying to say that during an intro. Be here. You do all these G-rated shows, and you choose your words very politically correct. And as anybody who's followed my career knows, I'm anything but politically correct.
Exactly. We're gonna start ECW. We're gonna go all over the board here, but of course I go where my heart lies. Okay, ECW explored all over the East Coast for a long time. I don't want all of ECW. I just want the Bingo Hall. I just want New Alhambra. I want ECW Arena. What was your favorite moment in front of that Philly crowd?
Well, for me, there's so many of them, because in my career, which is in its third decade now, which I feel like I'm starting to sound like Luke says, I'm in my third decade in the sport, and, for me, I've seen it go all over the place. I saw the huge run of the 80s die out, and then the second run in the 90s, and then I saw ECW literally come in and revolutionize the industry, and now it seems like we're back in the same place. The business has died off again, and we're back in the same place as we were. So for me to be the franchise character, the central character to Extreme Championship Wrestling as we launched it, I think, of all the great moments that we had in that building, the two that stand out most in my mind, and they run neck and neck, one good and one bad. The good one, obviously, throwing the NWA belt down, and launching ECW from being Eastern Championship Wrestling to Extreme Championship Wrestling, and going from a heavyweight title to a world title, and then being able to go on air and or in my promos and challenge Dick Flair and Shawn Michaels, who lost his smile around that time, Hulk Hogan, and all the rest of the guys to shoot. Just come on to Philadelphia, and we'll find out which of us is an entertainer and which of us is an athlete. And of course, none of them took the bait. So that was, to me, the launch of the character, really, even though I was playing the franchise previous. That was to where, at least in my mind, the franchise became a central figure in wrestling, because the other guys couldn't respond. On the bad side, and when I say bad, not negative, bad just in the way I received it, was when we threw Gary Wolf down with the broken neck. To see 1,100 people collectively, all as one individual face and voice, go from utter shock to wanting to rip my head off was pretty scary. I don't mind fighting the guy 2, maybe even 3 at times, but there's no way I'm taking on 1,100 crazy fans that are chomping at the bit to rip my head off. And to me, it's both of those, though, spelled, I think, the reason why ECW became so successful and changed wrestling in the 90s. And you still see the other companies not getting it after even 7 years of watching us do it right. And Vince even copied it with the Attitude Era. Now seems to be lost out there in the wilderness. What do we do? Let's open the show up with 25 minutes of boring talk. I don't know. If your name's Dixie, let's spend $150 million and dump it down the toilet.
That's exactly right, dude. That's a great point, because you know what? The wrestling industry is going down the shitter. Brandon Galvin, you got a question, buddy?
Yeah, Shane. No, you just touched on it. You were the true pioneer of ECW. But looking back and how people perceive ECW and its legacy, do you feel like you're not given your due credit when people talk about ECW's impact and legacy on professional wrestling?
You know what? For the jackasses like Bischoff or Dixie or Vince that don't get it, I could give a shit less. I'll put my legacy in ECW and the legacy of ECW and the loyalty of its fans up against them any day of the week. Look, it wasn't meant for everybody, clearly. But for those people that got it, you two seem to have gotten it. I got it. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fans around Philadelphia and then worldwide and nationwide got it. Those were the people we played to. I'm not worried about some 13, 15, 18, some 50-year-old WWF fan that wants to see garbage, quote, in Vince's words, we ain't wrestling, we're entertainment. So you got to look up the definition of entertainment in the dictionary, because it doesn't seem to be very entertaining either. But, for me, it was never about the masses. It was about the fans that loved wrestling and loved that violence and loved that realism, that wanted to be brought back to the table, that didn't want to buy into a Doink the Clown or a gobbledygooker. They wanted to see athletes going out there and running their mouth and knocking the hell out of each other, and that's what we delivered. So for the fans that never got it and don't like it, stick to the safe stuff. For the guys that want the hardcore and want extreme, ECW is right up their alley.
It's true. It's a great point. Michael Cahill?
Yeah, you've mentioned a couple times already that, Vince and Dixie certainly don't get it, and they're certainly not doing what you guys were doing, which was so groundbreaking. Why is it, do you think, that they can't copy what you guys did, or why is it that you think that they've failed so poorly in creating what you guys did?
Well, I think the biggest part of it is in their own head, and what they're looking to do. Like I said, Vince copied it with the Attitude Era and went to unprecedented heights. I mean, when he was drawing 8.8s and 8.9s in cable television, that was unheard of numbers, and still stands as an astounding number in wrestling. He did it by capitalizing on what we started and then just putting his machine behind it, which is what we were always worried about. I remember Tommy Dreamer coming to me early on in ECW and saying, what do we do if they copy us? And I didn't really believe that they could copy us, style for style, point for point, only because, to be fair to them, they were running 7 days a week. To do that style 7 days a week would certainly take skin off your rear end. So I didn't think they could do it, and they didn't copy it, move for move and point for point, but they did copy it in its idea and its feel. And by doing that, with the whole Attitude Era, took wrestling to unprecedented levels that may never be seen again. How then, stunningly to me, do we, less than a decade or around a decade later, has Vince McMahon so completely lost sight of what he needs to do with his product? I mean, let's face it, the UFC is dominating in the pay-per-view arena right now. And I think it's a phenomenal product. I really do. But I think when wrestling is done right, and what I mean by that is not stomping your foot and missing by 6 inches. I mean laying your stuff in, taking down your opponent, moves and counter moves, holds for holds, and violence for violence for what it's worth. And being realistic. That's what the UFC has built its empire on. Signed a $100 million contract with Fox Sports. How Vince McMahon and Dixie Carter, I only pick on them because they're the quote-unquote big two, how they allowed somebody else like Dana White to come in and pirate, commandeer away from us the best assets of wrestling and take it over there and capitalize on it to the tune of $100 million. As we sit back and seem to be content, if your name's Vince or Dixie, seem to be content with the garbage part of wrestling, the part that should have been thrown away, the talking with the points that mean nothing, the promos that don't point to any match or angle or opponent, it's just talking for talking's sake, the little skits that seem to me to be more pointed towards like a Saturday Night Live skit than toward a professional wrestling match. Well, to me, those big two that ain't so big anymore, they've had their run, they've had their time, and we've seen what their plans for the business and for the future of the business are. So for me and my taste, I'll stick to what we did and what we proved back then. I'm ready to shove these two off the side of the ledge and see if we can't bring some of those 38 to 40 million fans that have tuned out in the last 10 years and gone over to UFC and allowed them to dominate the pay-per-view genre. I'm willing to go back and fight for those people to come back to wrestling, where Vince and Dixie seem to not have very much of a fighting spirit.
All right. Let's go right there then. Okay, we got ECW, Extreme Reunion, whatever you call it, it's ECW in my mind. What are you going to bring? As now you're on the other side of it. As much as you are the wrestler now, you're really trying to push the new Extreme Reunion angle with this. Where do you see, what are you going to bring differently now to get those millions of people who fell away from wrestling now? This is a lull. This is a depression of wrestling of sorts. What are you going to bring to the table now that was different from 96, 97 when we fell in love with this? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not necessarily different or that it has to be a different plan. The plan was good. The plan was solid at the time. What we didn't realize until far too late was that the guy who was micromanaging every aspect of the company really had no forethought into the financial realm, which is the critical state. It's the lifeblood of any business. We all, Joey Styles came from corporate America. I've got a master's degree. Tommy Dreamer and Taz and Bubba were all involved in the office and all come with very, very special, unique skill sets into business. So had we all been involved in that side of it, I doubt we would have allowed it to go to that point of literally bankruptcy before we would have said something or done something to try to stave it off. So I guess the premise of your question to me is wrong, that there was something inherently wrong with the plan. The plan was solid. The implementation of the plan was wrong, and that Paul Heyman didn't seem to pay attention to that 2 and 2 equals 4. That's the most important part this time. And we put together a team, I guess to answer your question now directly, we put together a team this time, 5 partners, each that come to the table with a unique skill set. Mine obviously is in the wrestling, talent, and promotions. Steve O'Neill comes from a marketing and promotions background. Kevin Kleinrock comes with a skill set and a history in post-sales, DVDs and now media downloads. So all of these things together, to me, at least, make me feel more comfortable that, for me, it's not having to worry about booking the talent, writing the show, wrestling and performing on the show, plus then worrying about is the rent and the insurance paid on the building, and are the airfares all done? Do we have somebody picking the talent up at the airport, and do we have hotels lined up? The logistics in planning a show like this are astounding in their depth, and for a company like WWF and even TNA that has the internal mechanisms to handle these types of things. For us, it's 5 partners doing all the work. So it really does take on a different scale as to what each of us has to do and get done at the end of each week. That said, moving forward, we will be doing some things differently from the original ECW. First and foremost is the very widely disseminated information on this is not just a nostalgia show. We're not just going in and saying, here's the legends of ECW. Love us or hate us, come see us. It will be the legends of ECW, but we're also have part of the game plan, part of the paradigm for this go-around with Extreme is to bring in some newer, younger talent that, in my mind, would have fit back in the original ECW. The people that you see there on Saturday night that have been invited in to basically be given a tryout, and what I consider to be some of the hardest fans in the world. The old saying is, if you can make it there, the song New York, New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. If you can make it in front of the ECW fans in an Extreme building, then to me, you can cut the mustard with anybody. And so with that in mind, we decided to bring in and invite newer, younger talent so that we would have some longevity to the company. To be clear, anybody from the original roster that comes in and shows us and proves to us that they have the desire to continue to be involved and have the wares to be involved. There's no plan to, say, a year from now, shut down all the original Extreme legends and shove them out the door and run with the new faces. For the guys that can get it done in the ring and can do it, to me, that dressing room, the Extreme legends I'm talking about, that dressing room was by far the most talented dressing room, the hardest working dressing room, and really the best dressing room I'd ever been part of in my 30 years. So there's no plan to move beyond those guys. That said, we do plan on bringing new, younger talent in to fill some of those gaps and to give us some longevity as the legends of ECW and Extreme start to segue off and move behind the scenes, whether as agents or writers or just decide to retire or whatever. But right now, we can still get some road out of it, some rubber on the road for these legends. We're certainly going to do that. To me, they're an amazing group of talents, and we're going to capitalize on them.
Brandon Galvin?
Yeah, Shane, you touched on it in the intro. You're one of the best no-holds-barred mic workers in the industry's ever seen. You're an uncensored guy. And we've seen how effective these work-shoot promos are. We saw it with CM Punk last year. And how the fans just pick up on that. I mean, this is the age of the Internet. Everyone has the information out there. We want to know what everyone thinks of each other. But at the same time, as you touched on these Saturday Night Live skits, because there has to be a balance. If there's too many work-shoot promos going on in each show, is that going to dilute the product, or do you think that will still propel it to new heights?
Well, as we're launching, it's a great question. As we're launching it, I'm not sure. What is the percentage? 20%, 10%, 100%? We don't really know. As we're launching it, especially since we don't have a weekly episodic television show to feed back to each of the angles and each of the storylines going into each match. But I don't know if we want to have every person picking the mic up and every person going out there and trying to shoot. For me, that's where the management comes in. Not that we want to stifle somebody and say, well, you can't talk, but this guy or girl can. Clearly, we want to be able to deliver that feel of the product. And to me, the feel of the product was allowing that leeway for the guys to go out there and get on the microphone. I don't have to keep clarifying. When I say guys, I mean the boys, and by the boys, I mean the men and the women of ECW. To me, everybody that's on the team is one of the boys. So I don't have to keep clarifying that. But I think that it's important for us to note that is what put us on the map. We don't want to bore the fans. Anything. Maybe save sex. Too much of anything is not a good thing. And I think especially when it comes to talking, if it's well done, you have guys like Raven and New Jack, so many that are fantastic on the microphone. I would never try to stifle them. But we, by the same token, want to be able to steer the younger guys that we're bringing into the company to get them to learn that style, because it's not just about going out and throwing the F-bomb around. And